1, 2, we're talking here. I've got 1, 2, 3 at the table with me. Black Mike.
Mark them in. Check, check, check.
You need to have it 2 inches from your face when you're not talking. Sit it back.
Okay. Mark them in. Thank you. Yes?
1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Check. 1, 2, 3.
Check. 1, 2. Stand by, folks. It's the Veterans Radio Hour. Brought to you by Dallas Corporation for all your corporate printing needs, and by GIM Productions, creating internet solutions. Websites can do that. Now, stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Hour is next on the Veterans Radio Network.
Tango Charlie Bravo, you're a go for the Veterans Hour.
Welcome, one and all, to the Veterans Radio Hour. It's our tribute to all of those who served our great nation's armed forces, past and present, and their tremendous accounts of heroic duty and bravery. With your host, Brigadier General Dave Grange. And now, coming to you live from our Veterans Center studio, here is General Dave.
Good evening. Welcome. General Dave cannot be with us tonight. As you know, there's tensions going on in the world, and General Dave is facing some of them right now. This is going to be a great show because it's going to be extremely unique with the changes that have gone on in the way war seems to be fought. A lot of it has to do with air and air power. Tonight's show, Warbirds, aviation, archeology. And when I was first told about this, I said, now this is something terribly unique. It's something that we've got to let everybody know about. And tonight, we're going to spend the next 2 hours letting people know what it means to be involved in aviation archeology, or warbirds, as they're called. We'll be talking mostly about World War II vintaged aircraft. Since General Dave cannot be with us tonight, I'm Kenny DeCamp, his aide-de-camp, the specialist, who's going to be co-hosted tonight by a former captain in the Air Force and Air Force National Guard. His name is Mark Demmin, who also happens to be the executive director and the founder of the Aero Squadron Warbird Revenues Group. And Mark, welcome. I'm glad you're here with me tonight.
Good to be on board tonight, Kenny.
Anybody interested in calling in, you know that you can dial 866-928-2329. That's a toll-free number, 866-928-2329. to ask us some questions or make a few comments, especially if you yourself are also involved with Warbirds. We'll be having a few other guests sitting around with us tonight. I think I'll let Mark start bringing some of them in. I believe one of our first guests with you. Well, Mark, before I bring a guest in, tell me, what actually is a Warbird Veterans or Ventures group?
We're involved with educational purposes of getting young adults and their grandparents together, and also their parents, to visit Warbird aviation museums in the Great Lakes area, and getting them to on site, and also to, there's about 5 different areas that we work with, but also honoring our veterans, and also working with them to get their histories down for the National Archives and to propagate that history from World War II, and for one, also to get that information to their families, which is critical that they get that. And sometimes these veterans do not communicate that too well to their families. So I'm a neutral party that they can come to.
And you brought in with you Jim Chybicki, who I could see Jim is with a group called the Midwest Aeronautique. Is that correct, Jim?
That's correct.
And are you there with me, Jim? See if you're on.
Check.
There we go. Tell us exactly what a Midwest Aeronautique is.
Midwest Aeronautic is it's a small group of 3 people that love old Warbirds and old aircraft like that. We've been involved with a few museums in the Chicago area. After many years of working together at volunteering at museums and stuff like that, we came across our own World War II vintage aircraft, purchased it. We incorporated approximately 2 years ago, and we're restoring our aircraft back to flying condition to go to air shows.
And you were in the Air Force yourself, I see?
Yes, that's correct.
And how long do you spend with the Air Boys?
Actually, I'm still an active reservist today.
Well, good. We're glad to hear that. I know we have another one of your friends from the Midwest Aeronautic. In a little while, we'll be bringing him on. Also with us is Al Heinze. And Al, you're out of Aurora, Illinois, which is pretty close to us here. I know we're going to be dedicating the show to somebody very special tonight, too, that is from Aurora. But you're how do you say it?
Don't try to say that 10 times in a row.
Well, that's where my lisp is at. Go ahead, you tell me.
WWII Warriors Squadron, we maintain a B-25H, the only B-25H flying today.
And what is a BH-25?
B-25H.
Oh, a B-25H. You're going to have to clarify a lot of these things tonight for somebody that was in the medical corps.
That's a Mitchell bomber, a medium bomber.
Mitchell
bomber.
Okay. And Mitchell being General Mitchell?
Yeah, it was named after Billy Mitchell.
Oh, after Billy Mitchell. Now, that's a famous name that we've heard.
Absolutely. You ought to talk about a little bit about the uniqueness of that plane, especially in the nose.
Oh, the B-25 Gs and Hs were the only ones that had 75-millimeter cannons mounted in the nose. The Gs had a much more primitive model, and the Hs, when they were produced, came out with a less shocking 75-millimeter.
Is there a little bit of recoil with that?
Yeah, they call it a river popper because it could bolt them apart pretty good.
And over here, what kind of plane were you rebuilding? This is your first one, James?
This is the first one that we actually own on our individual basis. It's a 1943 Fairchild. Most people in the antique and airplane business refer to it as an F-24, but we have the military version, which is a UC-61 Forwarder, or an Argus III, as it was flown with the RAF during World War II.
Meaning the British.
That's correct, the Royal Air Force.
Mm-hmm. And Fred, our host, our web host here, has a question for you.
Yes, I did have a question. One thing I've always wondered about in terms of a Warbird restoration is when you restore a plane, do you restore the armament also to where it is, to where it's capable of being fired?
Everybody's pointing at me. No. No, but the Barbie 3, the B-25, has operational waste guns and that are operated by compressed air. And we certainly hope that our cannon, about midsummer, will have that mounted, and that'll be operational as well.
Is there a legal reason why you don't restore it to operational use?
Well, certainly so. The FAA kind of frowns on people flying things around that can actually fire actual ammunition, and of course in the hands of civilians. Even as such.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network.
You're listening to the Veterans Radio Hour. We're here every Sunday night between 8 and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. This is our second week of a 2-hour broadcast, as you all know who've been listening to us each week on the internet. It had been previously 1 hour, but now we're in a 2-hour format. So as I say, if you have enjoyed the 1-hour program, I think you'll enjoy the 2-hour program twice as much. This week is our 28th show. The focus of the program tonight is World War II Warbird restoration, and we have a panel of very knowledgeable people with us here in the studio this evening, as well as some who will be calling in later, who, as their part-time occupation, and I wonder if some are doing it on a full-time basis, restore World War II vintage aircraft. Some of the people in the studio this evening are Mark Demmin, Robert Coon, Jim Chybicki, Al Heinze, and on the phone we'll have Bob Cardin calling in a little later, Russ Strine, and Bob Collings. The Veterans Radio Hour is a unique theme-based talk show by, for, and about veterans. You can join General Dave Grange here each week for a lively and informative roundtable discussion. General Grange is not here this evening. He is on TDY with regard to some of the tensions going on in the world today, and we hope to have General Grange back as soon as it's possible for him to be here. In the interim, Kenny DeCamp, senior producer, is filling the host's chair, and we're sitting here tonight at the round table for a very interesting program, as I mentioned just now, on the subject of Warbird aviation archeology, or World War II Warbird restoration. So stay with us. We'll be back on the air very shortly here at the Veterans Radio Hour.
The best in military talk radio now continues with the Veterans Radio Show.
Welcome back, veteransradiohour.com. We're going to dedicate tonight's show, which is on Warbirds, aviation archaeology, to our friend Tom Tamaraz, the 15th Army Air Force, 485th B Group, 831 B Squadron. He was in Venosa, Italy, part of the Hells Angels. We thank him. He's out in our audience tonight. He's got a good crowd. We do have a good group of people today from World War II, and we're glad they're here with us.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network. The Veterans Hour proudly presents our military hero's story of valor.
Tonight's story of valor is a Medal of Honor recipient, actually two of them. They were on the same plane together, Walter Trumpier and Archibald Matthias. It has to do with an aircraft on which the second Lieutenant Trumper was serving as a navigator that got attacked by a squadron of enemy fighters, with the result of the co-pilot being killed outright and the pilot being wounded. He was rendered unconscious, and so the radio operator took over the plane, which was severely damaged. Nevertheless, Second Lieutenant Trumpier, with the help of Archibald Matthias, has tried to manage the plane and fly it back to their home station, where they contacted the control tower and reported their situation. Other members of the crew were ordered to jump, leaving the second lieutenant and the sergeant aboard. After observing the distressed aircraft from another plane, the second lieutenant decided that the damaged plane could not be landed by an inexperienced crew, and he also ordered them all to abandon it and parachute to safety. But demonstrating unsurpassed courage and heroism, Second Lieutenant Trumpier and Archibald Matthias replied that the pilot was still alive and could not be moved, and they would not desert him. So they'd made 2 attempts to land the plane into an open field. On the 3rd attempt, the lieutenant, the sergeant, and the wounded pilot were killed.
You're tuned to the Veterans Radio Hour with retired General Dave Grange, coming to you from the Veterans Center studio. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we're back here on aviation archaeology. This is where they sort of find planes and rebuild them. Is that what we talk about doing?
Yes, we do.
Okay, let's find out with your Mark, the museums that are in this area. You talked about the Great Lakes area.
Yes, there are quite a few. First and foremost is probably the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Another one that I would say would be one of the biggest is the EAA Museum up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. That's open year-round. Of course, Oshkosh is the biggest fly-in of the summer in the world, and a lot of warbirds fly into that. And I'm not sure what date it is this year, but it's coming up. Also, in Kalamazoo, Michigan, one of the most active warbird bases is the Kalamazoo Air Zoo at the Kalamazoo Airport. State of Illinois, since we're based here, we have quite a few museums. We have, unfortunately, it's inactive at the moment, but Air Classics Museum of Aviation in Aurora Airport. We have, down in Bloomington, we have the Prairie Air Museum. In Champaign, we have the private collection of Frasca Aviation, and that's a call-ahead place. At the old Schnute Field, it's closed. The museum is still there, and that's a large museum at Schnute Air Force Base in Rantoul, Illinois. In Lincoln, Illinois, there's a Heritage Flight Museum, which is really fascinating for a small airport. And it just goes on and on. Springfield, there's a Warbird Museum at the airport at Springfield Capital Airport. Down at Scott Air Force Base, there's some static displays. So it goes on and on and on. Believe it or not, there's quite a bit of warbird activity in the state of Illinois.
Mm-hmm. I think we got another guest on, Bob Cardin. I believe, Bob, you there with us?
Sure am. Hi.
Good. Hi, how are you?
Doing great.
Great. I guess I'm going to be a little bit impressed with yours. I'm impressed with everyone's, but P-38 Glacier Girl, I think I heard something on the news years back on this, the Lost Squadron. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure can. First of all, P-38 Glacier Girls recovered from 268 feet inside of the Greenland ice cap back during the summer of 1992. And that particular airplane was part of a group of P-38s and 6 P-38s and 2 P-17s that were being flown from the United States to England to fight World War II. They got lost in bad weather, eventually ran out of gas, and had to make a forced landing on the east coast of Greenland on the glacier. After 11 days, all of the 25 crewmen were rescued, but the airplanes are just abandoned there. Well, in this part of Greenland, it snows quite a bit, and every year there's anywhere from 35 to 50 feet of snow that falls, and in the summertime it doesn't all melt away, so we have about an average annual accumulation of about 7 feet. So from the time when the planes landed till the time when we went to Greenland to recover the airplane, 268 feet of ice and snow had accumulated on top of the aircraft.
Well, wait, 268 feet?
Yes.
And so, blow torches or what do you?
There was what I call a melting unit. It was a top, a conical-shaped device that was developed by a company in Tucker, Georgia called Hourway, and we used that to melt down to the airplane. The melting unit had a 900,000 BTU boiler to create the hot water, and we fired that on jet fuel. And once the thing was in operation and it was melting down to the plane, it melted down at a rate of about 2 feet per hour. So we were melting around the clock to get down to the airplane.
Wow. And it was totally intact, the inside as well as the outside?
The airplane was totally intact, except it was totally crushed. When we got down to the plane and after we started to make the cave around the P-38, we found that it was there. It was crushed, but it didn't look like it was too bad, so the decision was made at that point to continue with the recovery with the intention of bringing the aircraft to the surface and bringing it back to the United States for restoration. It was a 14-week operation. We got on the ice cap on the 6th day of May, and we left on the 22nd of August with one complete airplane.
And do you have to take the plane apart in pieces in order?
Once we got down to the plane and we made the cave, we found obviously that a 4-foot diameter shaft you're not going to pull a P-30F out of that. So the second thing we started to do is to melt the second shaft. While that was going on, a team of men went down into the hole, and we started to dismantle the airplane. Just took it apart in the same way that the factory had put it together.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're a retired lieutenant colonel, I understand?
That's correct.
United States Army helicopter pilot?
Yeah.
And
I flew helicopters and airplanes in the Army.
In the Army. Vietnam as well?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How many men were on the crew out here in Greenland?
I had a permanent staff of 10. They grew up to 18 when we first started, and it dwindled down to 7 in the last 8 or 9 days when we were finishing up the operation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Bob, this is Mark Demmin.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm fine, Bob. I sure appreciate being on the radio tonight with us. Bob, I have pictures of your expedition on the table here so everybody that's in the studio can see what went on.
Yeah.
Would you give your website address real quick for everybody?
It's thelostsquadron.com.
Okay, great, because that'll give the visuals, and also tell us a little bit about the special that's been on TV lately.
Yes. On March 3rd, the History Channel aired a 90-minute special that was called The Hunt for the Lost Squadron, which provided a very nice documentary on the history of the Lost Squadron, the recovery efforts through the years, the first flight of Glacier Girl. And it was a very entertaining documentary. It was on twice on the 3rd of March, and it will be on again here shortly, but we just don't have a date.
And who named her Glacier Girl?
The airplane came to the surface on August 1st of 1992, and there were 7 of us on the Glacier that were there during that phase of the operation. And that evening, over a bottle of Chivas Regal, we christened the aircraft Glacier Girl.
Well, you colonels are all alike. I've been talking to a few of them about the Chivas and the black labels and all those good ones.
Yeah.
We're going to be taking a break in a little bit. Bob Collings out of Boston is going to be calling us, too. Bob is with the Collings Foundation that worked with various warbirds. And I just got a note handed to me. We've got a nice audience tonight. And sitting out in the audience is the sister of the man who we honored, Second Lieutenant Trumpeter, Ann Prestero. Ann, you're there? Everybody say hi to Ann. Thank you for being with us tonight. Yeah, quite unique to be able to come, I would think, after all these years and still see that there are people that are wanting to recognize and wanting to honor those people that have done so much for our country. Also, we have in the audience with us the executive director of the 1350 Foundation, which all of you should go to 1350foundation.org. It helps us to understand a little bit more about our citizenship, the responsibilities we have of being an American, what the American flag means to many people in this country, and where we're going to be with all of the information and energy that we're going to be receiving over the next few days on what's happening today. Warbird Restoration, we're going to be coming right back thanks to the Information Radio Network, who's carrying us around the United States, and then we're in some 55 countries logged on veteransradiohour.com. Be back right after this.
In just a moment, the Veterans Radio Show will assemble in a military fashion right after this quick reload on the Veterans Radio Network.
You're listening to the Veterans Radio Hour. We're here every week at this time between 8 and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time here on the Information Radio Network and also on the Internet, where we're heard in some 55 countries. And we are certainly increasing our audience each week. We have people listening in the United States and throughout the world. Wanted to acknowledge some of these people. For example, Dr. Ted Gehrig, a former lieutenant in the Navy, who served in Great Lakes Naval Training between 1974 and 1976. He's listening this evening, a supporter of veterans and a very distinguished person in his own right. We have people that have been calling us and are sending emails, and we're very glad to hear from you, and we want to hear from everybody because the Veterans Radio Hour is a program that is for you. It's a program by, for, and about veterans, and your input is very important to us. We want to know what you think about what we're doing here, and if you have any ideas for future programs, please feel free to contact us here. You can do so by sending us an email, or you can call at 866-928-2329 if you have a question or comment while the show is in progress. If you are interested in sponsoring the Veterans Radio Hour, please give us a call toll-free also at 800-521-0020. Veterans Radio Hour is sponsored by Dallas Corporation for all your printing needs. You can log on to their website at dallascorp.com. That's DALLASCORP. Check out Dallas's website for the many graphic arts products and services they offer. Also, GIM Productions is a proud sponsor of the Veterans Radio Hour. Websites can do that. Check out their website at gimproductions.com. Pabst Blue Ribbon is another sponsor. PB Army, as they say. PB Army, ASAP. If you'd like details about sponsoring or becoming a founder of the Veterans Radio Hour, you can reach the business office, as I said, at 800-521-0020. If you have a question or comment while the show is in progress, call us toll-free at 866-928-2329. And, of course, don't forget to check out the discussion board on the Veterans Radio Hour website. Veterans Radio Hour is a unique theme-based talk show by, for, and about veterans. You can join us here each week for a lively and informative roundtable discussion featuring distinguished military and civilian guests. Topics include everything from historical events to contemporary issues of interest, vital interest to veterans and active service personnel. So stay with us here on the Veterans Radio Hour. We have just started off our first hour. We'll be here for approximately another hour and a half, and it's well worth your time. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Stay with us here at the Veterans Radio Hour.
Welcome back. The Veterans Radio Show now continues on the Veterans Radio Network.
The Veterans Radio Hour salutes the Active Service Person of the Week, made possible through the support of Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer. As they say, PB Army, ASAP. Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer, available at your local retail outlet.
And today, we are going to honor someone very unique because he's right here from our own hometown area. And I guess he's very close to Mark, my co-host tonight with us. Colonel Doug Knighton. He's the command chaplain of the Special Operations Component Central. That is, this man directs all the Special Forces personnel in operation while overseeing the ministry operations of chaplains serving special operation units. Right now, I understand he's in Qatar. And I'm happy to say his wife Maja's with us, so a big one to the wife Maja and Colonel Doug, our service person of the week.
You're listening to the Veterans Hour with retired Brigadier General Dave Grange. And now, back to the broadcast.
And this is Kenny DeCamp sitting in for the General, who's out on TDY, a special assignment. As you know, this is a very tense time we're working around the world in. That's why I give a lot to Colonel Doug there, saying prayers for all of us. And I now want to bring on, I've got Bob Collings out of Boston's come on the phone with us, and Bob is the founder of the Collings Foundation, which has something to do with the Wings of Freedom Tour. Bob, you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Tell us about the Wings of Freedom Tour and about your foundation.
Well, the Wings of Freedom Tour includes a B-17 Flying Fortress and a B-24 Liberator that we tour all around the United States. We typically will do about 125 to 130 stops a year, and the goal of the Wings of Freedom Tour is to honor our veterans, letting them know that they've not been forgotten, and also to educate the visitors, especially younger Americans, about the planes and World War II.
And do you give rides?
Yes, we do, as a matter of fact.
Do.
You can come out, you can tour through the insides of the airplane, which is pretty unique because most museums do not allow you to go through the airplane. But you can tour through the inside of them, and then also for special people who would like to make a supporting donation to the foundation, you can actually take a flight in the airplane.
I got a picture here they just brought up to me. This thing looks rather large.
Well, it is. For World War II, it was very large. Both of them are 4-engine heavy bombers, as they were referred to. By today's standard, they're pretty small. When you see them beside a 737 or a 757, they look pretty small. But at the time, of course, in the 1940s, we were just coming out of an era in which the aircraft were constructed of canvas and wood, and to have a 4-engine heavy bomber that could fly about 1,500 miles out and 1,500 miles back and drop a payload was a pretty significant thing.
Mm-hmm. And I see you're going to be out in our area at the Wheeling-Pewaukee Airport in July.
Yes. Well, we travel all around the country, and we do get to the Chicago area in the July time frame, and we welcome everybody to come out and visit us and see them at that time.
Mm-hmm. That's July 17th through the 20th, and do you have a website where people can visit you as well?
Yes, we do. It's the Collings Foundation. That's spelled C-O-L-L-I-N-G-S, and then Foundation, F-O-U-N-D-A-T-I-O-N, all one word, .org. And we do have a website that has our schedule of our visit around the country. It also has a lot of information on the various planes that we have, in addition to the two that are featured on the Wings of Freedom Tour.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Bob. This is Jim Chybicki from Midwest Aeronautics.
Yes.
Big fan of yours. Been following you for about 15 or 20 years. One question that has come to my attention is, why doesn't the Collins Foundation bring the B-17 and the B-24 to the Oshkosh Air Show? I believe you guys were there last year with the new F-4 with Colonel Ritchie.
We have been at Oshkosh a couple times with the B-17 and the B-24. It's very difficult for us as a foundation to support the cost of being there because there's really no opportunities for giving rides while we're there. And if you're on the flight line, they shut down the flight line at about 12 or 1 o'clock, so you can't do much in the way of tours. And when you have 10 people traveling with the airplanes, it kind of becomes a nice event to be at, but you can't hardly afford to do it very often.
That's fantastic. My partners and I are not quite to the B-17, B-24 stage. We got a UC-61, the old Fairchild 24. Mm-hmm. You mentioned funding. Being that we're just now getting into the Warbird industry, how would starter-uppers like us get into it where we can actually do it as a full-time basis, or should we keep it as a hobby?
Well, you know what they say, I wouldn't give up your day job. Caring for these Warbirds is a pretty expensive process. We estimate that the B-17 and B-24 run about $3,000 an hour, and the Phantom runs about $6,000 an hour. So they're very expensive. It takes a lot of support, both financially and and the support of mechanics and so forth to keep these warbirds flying. We unfortunately don't get any government funding whatsoever. All of it's private hands and private individuals, and it's mainly people who have some connectivity with the planes. Either they flew them, or their dads flew them, or they have some kind of emotional involvement, like they love warbirds and so forth. So we find, fortunately, a fair number of people who are anxious to keep a certain number of them flying, and our B-24 is the only true B-24 flying in the world out of 18,500 that were built, the most produced American plane of all times, and our F-4 Phantom is the only F-4 that's in civilian hands. So some of these are really, really rare aircraft.
Well, you're here at the Veterans Radio Hour. We're talking with people who restore and then fly old World War II planes, warbirds they're being called. Bob Coons and James Chybicki are both from the Midwest Aeronautique out of Bolingbrook, Illinois. Al Heinze, the Weary Warrior from Aurora, Illinois. Bob Cardin, the Lost Squadron, the P-38 Glacier Girl Restorer, and Bob Collings with the Collings Foundation, various warbirds. Now I've got some questions that are starting to hit us up. If you go on our website, we do have a discussion chat room board, so people are starting to ask. So anybody who wants to jump in on it right away, let me know. The first question is, do they restore, any of you, or is there a museum here, even in the States, that restore any aircraft other than U.S. aircraft?
Bob, why don't you go ahead and grab that? Either Bob.
Well, there are people who restore other aircraft in U.S. British are particularly popular. There's several Spitfires that are restored. And then up into the Hawker Hunters and so forth. There are quite a number of Soviet vintage MiG 17s and 21s that have been restored. They're from Soviet Union, China, Poland, and so forth. So there are people who restore aircraft other than American aircraft, and but I think the majority of the interest in this country is in American aircraft.
I would imagine so. You got something there?
Yeah, to add to Mr. Collings there, I think a lot of the stuff that he was speaking about, most of the Eastern Bloc countries, once the wall came down, a lot of those older MiGs and things like that came from Russia and those Eastern Bloc countries became very available on the market at very low prices.
No
so
kidding.
A lot of people were importing those other than trying to find old U.S. aircraft to rebuild. Is that correct, Bob?
Yes,
Bob Collings, did you literally go out and find yours overseas?
Well, several of them we found overseas. The B-24 Liberator actually came out of India, and it owes its existence to the fact that once the war was over, India, of course, became a nation and then flew 30-some Liberators from 1948 to 1968, and it preserved some significant number, although there are only 10 known in the world. We've gotten them offshore. We've gotten some of the planes domestically. Our B-17 formerly was a fire bomber dropping water and borate on forest fires out in the western part of the country. So I think most people that are involved with warbirds go all around the world finding parts and finding airplanes and sometimes finding people with the expertise necessary to restore them. I know that some of the most challenging is some of the people that are doing restoration of German aircraft and sending the Daimler-Benz engines back to Germany for overhaul at a low price of $250,000. So this is not a sport that requires any sanity test to get involved in it, but sometimes it's helpful to have a deep pocket.
Well, I've been telling everybody that I'm having all these millionaire guys come on the show tonight and talk about how they do this. Bob Cardin, you're still there with us, I hope?
Yes.
Oh, good. Who ended up funding your expedition?
The money for the expedition and the restoration was provided to the project by Mr. J. Roy Schaffner from here in Middlesboro, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. He did fund the recovery and the restoration. He was very, very generous in his support to restoring this very, very unique airplane.
Yeah, these guys here are all writing his name down.
You have a telephone number there while we're at it?
So probably I would imagine it was in the millions that it took to make that happen.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was up in the several millions to get the airplane in the air.
And are you working towards another one, Mr.
Oh, no,
Cardin?
we're still, even though we've flown this aircraft, we've flown it twice. Matter of fact, we're going to fly it again this coming Thursday. We're still flying off the permanent airworthiness certificate. And before we display the airplane, we still have a lot of declimania to put on the plane and a lot of little fine details before we're going to be ready to display it. And then our attention is going to shift from restoration to presentation in our museum and on the road.
What airworthiness category is that airplane?
So we're going to be experimental exhibition.
Mm-hmm. Another one of our listeners, he's been with us a lot, Army 16161, has sent in a quick question. The Confederate Air Force, are they still using that name? Is that still around?
No, they have a new name. It's called the Commemorative Air Force.
Now it's commemorative. And what aircraft are they flying?
They have a pretty wide range of aircraft. It varies what's flying at any one time. I mean, throughout the CAF, they have the only B-29 that's flying.
Mm-hmm.
They have an LB-30, which is a transport variation of the B-24.
Good. Well, we're going to be taking a quick break. We'll come back and talk a little bit more. I got a couple more questions. You're listening to Veterans Radio Hour. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network.
You're listening to the Veterans Radio Hour. Veterans Radio Hour is a 2-hour show every Sunday evening between 8 and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you find yourself in the Chicago area any Sunday night, we invite you to come on down here to the Veterans Center studios and be part of our studio audience and see what actually happens here at the studio each week. We're located at 4340, that's 4340 Cross Street in Downers Grove, Illinois, which is just off of the Ogden Avenue exit of Interstate 355. You can come by anytime after 7:30 right here in the studio, and you'll receive a very warm welcome. And we invite you to come by and be a part of our audience. Veterans Radio Hour is sponsored by Dallas Corporation for all your printing needs, by GIM Productions. Websites can do that. Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer also is a sponsor, as they say, PBR me ASAP. If you'd like details about sponsoring the program or becoming a founder, give us a call here at the business office, toll-free, 800-521-0020. If you have a question or a comment while the show is in progress, call us toll-free at 866-928-2329. And don't forget to check out the discussion board on the Veterans Radio Hour website. Tonight's program is quite interesting. The subject is World War II Warbird restoration. We have some very knowledgeable people here on the panel this evening discussing their efforts to restore World War II aircraft. And we also have a lot of activity in the chat room and many questions coming in. So stay with us for the Veterans Radio Hour.
Veterans Radio Show is clear for a landing. Let's resume our broadcast from the Veterans Center studio.
Here we go.
And this is Kenny DeCamp sitting in for General Dave tonight. We're talking about warbirds and aviation archaeology. We've got some very unique guests, Bob Coons and James Chybicki, both from the Midwest Aeronautics. They're new guys, I guess. It sounds like they're just starting to work on the first planes that they want to make happen. Al Heinze, the WWII warrior. We've got to find out a little bit more about what's happening with yours. Bob Cardin from the Lost Squadron, the Glacier Girl, and Bob Collings, the Collings Foundation, who works with various warbirds. We're really glad and happy that you could all join us tonight. Mark Demmin sitting here with me. He's the executive director of the Warbirds Venture Group that takes people around. Explain a little bit more to our audience on how they can be involved with that. And we've got a whole nother hour to go after this show, so give us a little bit of that.
Well, all you have to do is contact me, but it really started out as a love of all the aviation nuts in my church. And it continues. Every 6 months, roughly, we put a bus to 2 busloads of people together to go to the Air Force Museum on Friday night and spend the whole day there. And it's just grown. Interest has been shown from other churches. It's easier to do it through a church. It's a little more controlled, but I've had people approach me about other organizations. But getting father and sons, whole families together to go to the Air Force Museum, which is the biggest military aviation museum in the world, and it's getting bigger by 200,000 square feet here in the next month when the new Cold War hangar opens. And all the Air Force Ones are there, of all the presidents, fighters, bombers, you name it. Everything is showcased there. A World War II 8th Air Force control tower is rebuilt there, Quonset huts, memorials to all the squadrons and groups and wings. It's just a phenomenal place. The summer will be the World War I fly-in, which is only held every 3 years. So if you want to pull up the Air Force Museum's website, just go in your search engine and pull up Air Force Museum, Dayton, Ohio, and you'll find out all about the programs this year. And both Bobs, if you're still online, I'd like to ask you, because Russ Strine couldn't make it, I guess, tonight from Mid-Atlantic Air Museum. Do you have any information on the P-61 restoration that was pulled out of Hollandia?
I saw Russ in December at the ICAST show, and I asked him about it. He said it's moving along pretty well. I mean, they're putting a lot of time and energy in it. It's mainly a volunteer effort. I think they're pretty well done with the fuselage at this point, but that still leaves a lot of wing structure and tail booms and other kinds of things to get done. Of course, the P-61 is an extremely rare aircraft. I think there are maybe 3 left in the world, and if they do get theirs flying, it will be the only flying one. So it's an extraordinary rare aircraft and a very unique airplane.
You got it. Well, I appreciate that. I wish we could have had it on board, but we do in the studio here have pictures of that, and there's a lot of P-61 Black Widow nuts that love that plane, and we'll be happy to see it in the air. I'm going to pass this to anyone else that has any questions here on the panel.
Al Heinze, tell us a little bit more about exactly how you got the name WWII Warrior, or why you're now working on planes here, being an old Army guy.
Well, I enlisted for warrant officer flight training and didn't work out. The WWII Warrior's name of the group was a child of Walter Wild, the fellow who bought the airplane to begin with. And it just stuck with the group, and we carried it ever since. It's a tongue twister, so it's kind of a unique name. I started in aviation in 1967, and got my first restoration, and was a P-51D at Midway Airport from 1970 to 75. And then thereon, I've done L5s and one other B-25, and then this one here.
Is this a private venture, or you're involved with a group?
I'm involved with a group, but it takes a group. It's just like the gentleman said, mental illness is prerequisite, and it takes a considerable amount of time and effort and money, to keep the airplane in the air.
And I guess money is the big thing for all of you to consistently be trying to work it out. Who is there the largest private collector of air? Someone was telling me
He's coming on board. Kermit Weeks will be online.
Kermit Weeks going back on the second hour with us?
That's right.
And I guess both Bobs know Kermit?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. And also Paul Allen is of Microsoft is definitely growing a collection right now.
Oh, but that's a big secret. Let's not let everybody know that.
Yeah.
Okay, we only have a few thousand listening today, so I guess we'll be all right. Well, that's good. There's another question that came in. When restoring foreign aircraft, do you ever encounter booby traps or interesting technical gadgets? This is from a fan in Georgia.
I ran into a problem with Glacier Girl just on an American airplane having a detonator in the IFF radio we're concerned about. We found out after we got it out and took it apart that it wasn't her.
Uh-huh. And what do you think, it was set by the people that left the plane there?
It was an explosive device designed to destroy the IFF radio, and it didn't go off, so we didn't know if the charge itself was still active or not. But after we got into it a little bit, we realized it wasn't.
See, in World War II, there were a couple of things that were considered top secret. The Norden bomb site was one, and the radio communications, IFF, meaning identify friend or foe. So when you crashed, if you crashed your airplane, you were definitely supposed to, blow up the radios and destroy the bomb site, else they might fall into enemy hands.
Well, that's something else. We're going to be taking our break now to go into our second hour. We'll end up being joined by Kermit Weeks, we hope, from Fantasy of Flight, and also Joe Petipo, a commemorative Air Force Warbird. Also tonight, being co-hosted with Mark Demmin, who has been an executive director of a great organization helping sons and fathers especially get involved with warbirds. And his son's with us tonight. He's our general singer that comes around. He's got that velvet voice. He sings vintage for our World War II friends. This is a special tune that's going out to the ladies in the crowd who have to watch their men fly off. Anytime, Mr. Mark Demmin.
An oldie but a goodie. Fly me to the moon. Let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, oh darling, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you. With song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network.
Okay, you are listening to the Veterans Radio Hour, and we have a very interesting show tonight about World War II aircraft restoration, Warbirds. It's really apparent in looking at the men here at the round table and listening to the callers that it is a labor of love. Certainly it isn't something that is financially rewarding, but it is spiritually rewarding, I might say, to take these very memorable historical artifacts and to, in effect, recreate them and have a almost a living memorial to the great achievements of the people who flew these planes in defense of our country half a century ago. So we salute all of these fine people who are devoting so much time, effort, and financial resources toward that goal. I myself had the privilege of not flying in a flying fortress, but in touring a flying fortress at an air show some time ago, and it was really thrilling to be in an actual historical object which I had seen in motion pictures or in other associations previously, but had never seen up front and right in front of my eyes, and it was thrilling. So I encourage everyone to attend an air show and look at some of these wonderful historical aircraft. Veterans Radio Hour is going into its second hour very shortly, so stay with us. We're going to have a little musical entertainment for you during that period, and then we'll be back on the air. I do just quickly want to say that Veterans Radio Hour is on every week at this time between 8 and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're heard in over 50 countries throughout the world, as well as on the Information Radio Network. A little bit later, I'll be announcing some of the stations that are carrying us, some new affiliates that have just signed on. And why don't I even mention them right now? In Alabama, we have WWII at 1290 a.m. in Sylacauga, Alabama. In Chicopee, Springfield, Massachusetts, WACE 730 a.m. In New York, we have 3 stations. First in Hamlin, Brockport, New York, WASB at 1590 a.m. In Hamlin, Canandaigua, New York, WRSB at 1310 a.m. And in Hamlin, Brockport at WMJR 105.5 FM. In Tennessee, we want to welcome WMQM at 1600 a.m. in Memphis. In Spokane, Washington, KTRW at 970 a.m. And these are some of the new affiliates that have just come on with us, carrying the Veterans Radio Hour. Thank you for listening. Stay with us. We'll be back on the air shortly.
Welcome back. The Veterans Radio Show now continues on the Veterans Radio Network.
And welcome back. This is Kenny DeCamp sitting in for General Dave. I'm also being co-hosted by Mark Demmin Sr., who's the Executive Director of a Warbird Restoration Group, taking people all over the Midwest looking at great warbirds. And today's show on aviation archaeology, we're also going to be joined now by Kermit Weeks, Fantasy of Flight, as well as Joe Petipo. He's with the Commemorative Air Force Warbirds Group. Sitting at the table with us tonight is Heinze, Weary Warrior, and Robert Coon and James Chybicki, the Midwest Aeronautique Group. And before we get back to that, I need to tell you this is our 28th program, and we thank all of our sponsors, military.com, saluting all who answered the call to our nation's service, the 1350foundation.org, honoring the rights and responsibilities of citizenship, our supporters, Sherman Consulting, the media strategist supreme here in Chicago, Rudy Pamintuan. And we got Lieutenant Colonel Dan Bogoyevich and Andrew Palermo of Pillar Home Loan. They're out in the audience with us tonight. They've been sponsors a long time with us. Next week's program, it's going to be on America and military stories. It's going to probably be a very poignant time in our history of America. And we're going to be honored to have Dr. John Votaw, the Executive Director of the 1st Division Museum, author W. Thomas Smith, who just wrote a book called The Encyclopedia of the CIA, and he's now finishing a book on military stories of the 20th century. Dr. Carla Nowalski, the founder of the 1350 Foundation, and our military enthusiast, Big Steve Sumsky. And I think I'm going to go to Kermit Weeks right off the bat because, Kermit, you're with us?
Hey, is that Kenny?
Yes.
Yeah, how you doing from Florida?
Very nice. What town in Florida are you calling in from?
Polk City, big booming metropolis between Tampa and Orlando.
Okay, that must mean it has a large airfield.
Well, it's got a large airfield. Mine, unfortunately, is the only one.
Yeah, everybody's telling us that you've got quite a nice little collection. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with your Fantasy of Flight?
Well, we're in our 8th year now. We opened in 1995, and we're real proud of what we've done. We're real excited about what we're going to do in the future. We've got big plans. Right now, we're on a couple hundred acres, 2 runways, the longest of which is 5,000 foot. We've got about a mile and a half of shoreline to fly vintage seaplanes, and everything that we intend to do, we've already done a 1930s, 40s deco building that's probably 150,000 square feet with the hangars and shop facilities and the attraction area. And we eventually are going to do all the airplanes will be housed in their own period environment. So pre-World War I, World War I, Golden Age, as well as World War II and beyond. So.
Wow, this sounds like a fantastic place. And how are you going to get people to go there? Are you starting a marketing campaign, or is that already happening?
We've been marketing so far with brochures and we've got billboards. Actually, from our customer surveys, word of mouth is our best form of advertising. We're kind of a unique combination at this point between a kind of an airplane museum and a tourist attraction. So it's a little difficult to describe, but when people come, we exceed their expectations, and they go tell their friends, and they come on and see us.
And do you have a website you could tell us?
It's fantasyofflight.com.
Okay, that's pretty.
And I think, like everybody else, we're in the process of making it better. So.
Okay, .comer. Help me out with this one. We've got on our website a chat room, so people are constantly sending in things. We have one that just came in from Great Britain, so luckily we've got someone listening over there. His name is Max, and he's interested in who acquired the planes from the Tallman's Museum in California.
I purchased the whole museum in 1985.
You did?
Yeah. There was 36 airplanes.
And did you have to restore these, or they were already just sitting there waiting for you?
Frank Tallman and Paul Mance did a lot of movie flying, and when they weren't flying the airplanes, they had what they called the Movie Land of the Air Museum on the Orange County Airport in Los Angeles. And Paul was killed during the movie Flight of the Phoenix in the 60s, mid-60s, I think 64 or 5. And they had an auction, I think in 1968, and sold a couple of airplanes off. A Sop with Camel was actually purchased by Charles Schultz, which was the Snoopy rider. And Frank continued on. He was unfortunately killed in a weather accident in the mid-'70s, and his widow and the company carried on for a number of years, and finally in the mid-'80s they decided to put it up for sale, and I was the fortunate one to. There was a lot of people were interested in some of the early airplanes that they had. Some of the people were interested in some of the World War II airplanes, and I actually was fascinated by everything. So I was fortunate to buy the collection, and I probably at that period of time owned about 10 airplanes, I would say, 10 to 15 airplanes, and all of a sudden my collection increased by 36 airplanes.
Well, fantastic. Do you have a military background?
I don't.
You don't. You just have a lot of military planes.
Yeah, I think like everybody, we can all relate to what got us fascinated with aviation and airplanes. And when I was 13 years old, something as simple as hearing a song on the radio, Snoopy and the Red Baron, I heard that song and it lit a spark inside me, and I went and read every book I could find on World War I aviation and the aces, and the rest of my life was down an aviation path. And you've got one of those planes, or? Yes, I've actually, I've got a number, probably the largest private collection of original World War I airplanes in the world. I think I've got 12 or 13 original World War I airplanes, plus some replicas. And, of course, you fly the majority of them. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I fly everything from rotary-powered World War I fighters to four-engine bombers and flying boats and, fighters, and love it. And the chat room also wants to know, do you have any of the old foreign planes as well? Oh, yeah. Actually, I believe I've got probably the largest private collection of British World War II airplanes in the world, including, Spitfires, Tempest, Hurricane Project, Lancaster, Sunderland, Mosquito, Lysander. And on and on. And on and on. And a Zero? I do have a Zero that's a project. Came off an island beach in New Guinea, and it's the basis of a rebuild. Yeah, very good, very good. We're going to be taking a break, and then we're going to be joined by Joe Pepito. We've also got Bob Collings and Bob Cardin still on the line with us, and our guys sitting here at the table. VeteransRadioHour.com. If you're listening on the internet, go ahead and plug in and call on 866-928-2329. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network.
You're listening to the Veterans Radio Hour. Veterans Radio Hour comes to you every Sunday evening at this time between 8 and 10 p.m. I was just intrigued with what Mr. Weeks was just saying in the interview a few moments ago about how he got interested in antique aircraft, and it was simply by hearing a song as a child. And this sparked an interest. I believe the song had to do with Snoopy and the Red Baron, and sparked an interest, and he has amassed what is obviously an absolutely extraordinary collection of antique aircraft. And the next time I'm down in the Tampa, Orlando area, I'm certainly going to see if I can get over there and see some of those planes. Veterans Radio Hour is a weekly, it's a unique weekly theme-based talk show by, for, and about veterans. You can join us here each week for a lively and informative roundtable discussion featuring distinguished military and civilian guests. Topics include everything from historical events to contemporary issues of vital interest to veterans and active personnel. You know, to read a book or watch a movie about World War II or the Vietnam War is always interesting, but to hear an interview with an actual participant, such as recent special guest Colonel retired George Bud Day, the most highly decorated flyer in American history, and to have the opportunity to call in and talk with him is something else again. It's the stuff of which great radio is made, and that's why we think it's worth your while to listen to the show every week. If you are a veteran, if you know a veteran, if you care about veterans affairs, this is a show for you. So be sure to listen to us here each week at the Veterans Radio Hour. Let me just take one moment, if we have time, to acknowledge some of the people that are behind the scenes here at the show. Carl King, Lambert Matias, several other people. We're a little bit short on time, so I won't go through the list now, but we all work very hard to bring the show to you each week, and we love to hear from you, so send us an email in the chat room, give us a call, let us know what you think, and thank you for listening to the Veterans Radio Hour.
The Veterans Radio Show is clear for a landing. Let's resume our broadcast from the Veterans Center studio.
And tonight, we're going to be doing the quote from the week.
Here is today's military quote of the day, brought to you by support from retired Lieutenant Commander Adrian Rubinkowski.
You can tell General Dave's not with us tonight. Yeah, quote of the week, quote of the day. We're going to give it, how about the quote of the month? Since we're talking about flying, and we mentioned we had our good buddy Colonel Bud Day with us recently, one of the most decorated Air Force pilots around. This quote comes from Captain David McCampbell, United States Navy. He was the leading ace in World War II, and his quote was, "Aggressiveness was fundamental to success in air-to-air combat. And if you ever caught a fighter pilot in a defensive mood, you had him licked before you started shooting."
You're listening to the Veterans Hour with retired Brigadier General Dave Grange. And now, back to the broadcast.
As just mentioned, General Grange is not with us tonight. I'm sitting in, Kenny D. Camp, usually the senior producer, co-host, and I'm being co-hosted with my friend Mark Demmin. And I think, Mark, you've got a question right off the bat we want to talk.
Yes, I'm going to target Kermit with this. Kermit, B-24. You have one of Dave Talachay's old birds. Tom Tamraz is here in our studio. He was in the 44th Bomb Group, 8th Air Force, and the 485th, the 15th Air Force, a gunner. And also, one of our studio cast, Jim Chybicki, was on the Castle Air Force Base refurb crew on a B-24. And then we also have Bob Collings with an ex-Indian Air Force B-24. How are things going with your bird?
Well, actually, I saw mine this evening, and actually Bob's was down at my place this last weekend. His B-24 and B-17 were on their tour, and I just came in from a ski trip, so I missed it. But Bob, I think they had a pretty successful thing, although we had some rain today. My airplane was sitting out on the ramp. I had picked the airplane up in the early 90s, I think about 93 from Dave Talachay, picked it up at the Palwaukee Airport, flew it back home. We flew about 6 air shows with it, and I landed here 2 weeks before we opened Fantasy, a flight in 1995, and decided that it was too rare an airplane not to spend some time and money and effort on, and we basically have parked it since that time until we completely restore the airplane.
Okay. Well, get her in the air. I hope you can. We'd like to see those planes put into a movie, possibly highlighting the Ploiesti raid some days. So
good.
That would be great to have you on board for that.
And we're now being joined by Joe Pepito. Is that how you say it, Joe? Pito?
Pepito.
Oh, Pepito. Okay, nice Italian guy.
Yep.
Okay, Pepito. I got you now, my friend. I'm glad you called in. You're with the Commemorative Air Force. Is that what we were talking a little bit about? Was that used to be called the Confederate?
It used to be the Confederate Air Force, and about a year ago we changed the name to Commemorative Air Force to be politically correct. And actually our headquarters is in Midland, Texas. And we have wings all over the country and all over the world, actually. We have one in France and one in Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, Belgium, England. And we got about 90 different wings or squadrons throughout the United States. So we're a pretty big organization.
But tell us why it was initially called Confederate, because, I mean, I go back to the Confederate days, and, of course, there weren't planes then.
No, we
So
didn't
help
own
me
Air
out.
Force then. The way it started out was down in southern Texas. A group of guys down there bought an airplane, P-51, and they figured they'd fly it and have some fun with it. And then they got a P-40, I think it was, and they started doing some dogfighting, and somebody got the bright idea, geez, we got enough airplanes, we can start an Air Force. And on the P-51, somebody printed on the back end Confederate Air Force, and that kind of stuck with us. And that P-51, which we call Red Nose, is still with us down there in Midland, Texas, and it's been with us for quite a while.
So then the Confederate group then is, as you said, they're all over, it seems, in the world. So it's an organization that people who have the planes can join?
Well,
loosely?
actually, like I say, we have about 145 aircraft. Our fleet keeps growing. But all of the aircraft belong to the headquarters organization in Midland, Texas. There are no actual private aircraft in the organization. All of the aircraft belong to the headquarters organization. But what they do is they bail these aircraft out to each of the wings that can support them. For instance, here in the Southern California wing, we have something like 10 airplanes right now. And we have two big 100 by 150-foot hangars that we store them in and do our restoration and maintenance work in. And we also have a museum here that houses a lot of World War II artifacts. So it's quite a big organization. It's a very interesting organization. And our primary goal is to keep alive that heritage that we had during World War II and to keep alive the history of all of the various air forces that flew during World War II.
Well, then you're probably the perfect guy to ask. We had a question come in our chat room from an airman in Texas. He wants to know on the restorations, do you have to fabricate the parts themselves, or how do you find parts?
Well, what we do is, for instance, I've got a restoration project going on here now on a B-25. The B-25, we obtained it from a fellow down in Florida, but it had sat down there for about 8 years and got pretty well beat up and corroded. So when we went down to Texas to pick it up, one wing was so badly corroded that we had to replace the wing before we could fly it up here. So what we did is I borrowed a wing from Carl Scholl over here at Chino Airport, loaded it on our C-46, flew it down to Midland, Texas, replaced the wing, loaded the old wing back on the airplane on a 46, brought it back up here, and then swapped wings again. So you can see it was quite an operation. And by the way, that particular operation was covered by Air Classics in one of their magazines, and it was quite a deal. But we got the airplane up here. Now we are in the process of practically rebuilding the airplane. It sets along had corrosion all through the wing sections. The fuselage, we're practically rebuilding the entire fuselage. So it gets to be quite a lengthy process.
And Kermit, is that similar to what you find you have to do?
Yeah, we have to sometimes manufacture new parts. Everything was built and fabricated at one point, and you can still do it again. It just takes time and money and machines and a lot of effort and TLC.
Well, Kermit, we got Carl Scholl up here at Chino, and he's the B-25 guru. So he has a lot of parts that we were able to obtain from him.
Yeah, well, he just finished an 18-year restoration on my B-25.
I saw that, Kermit.
Do most of the restorations take that long, or
I think this one sets the record. It was a back burner project since 1983, and I think they have more money in it than I do, actually. So my patience paid off.
Yeah.
This is Fred Cutchins, the internet host. This is Fred Cutchins, internet host. I just had a question. When a downed aircraft is located, say one that went down during World War II, and you want to restore it, What are the legal steps that you have to go through to obtain ownership and the right to restore it?
Kermit, you know?
It kind of depends. The Air Force, my understanding is the Air Force, basically their record building burnt down sometime back a while ago. If you recover something, I think basically, you can own it, although how you actually license it, I'm not exactly sure. The Navy went through a period where when some of the airplanes were coming out of Lake Michigan, they were disputing, and it ended up in a couple of court cases where, they were just, whether or not the Navy still owned them or not, because effectively they were abandoned. But other than some of the airplanes that come out of Lake Michigan, there's not that many that would have been war crashes that, somebody is going to get flying without a whole lot of effort. There's a lot of airplanes coming out of, or projects coming out of Russia. But, even if the data plate's there, I think basically you sign an affidavit saying that, you basically found this thing, you got legal, a title, or, it was legal to take it out of the country, and, basically it's yours, finders keepers.
And Joe, there's not that many that are found overseas, are there?
No. We've got a Japanese Zero that came out of Bougainville, but the way we got it was a fellow from Canada brought this thing back from Bougainville up to Canada, and I forget the exact location up there. Then he restored it and brought it back into the United States, and we bought it from him.
And you fly most of these too, Joe?
I'm strictly a maintenance man.
I saw on the
I was a P-47 crew chief during World War II, and I'm staying on the ground.
Yeah, I saw on the History Channel today, they said it's the crew chief that really owns the plane.
That's
he
right.
only lets the pilot fly it. That's right. We're going to be taking another quick break, and then we'll be coming back, and we'll have a nice long segment after that. So you're listening to the Veterans Radio Hour. We're talking about the good flying birds, the warbirds. People who restore them and find them and then fly them around and let people fly with them, as well as walk in and out of them and see what it was like to be World War I, World War II. This is the Veterans Radio Hour. Plugging in at 866-928-2329 if you got a question or a comment. We'll be back after this message.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network.
This is the Veterans Radio Hour. We're here every Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're heard on the Information Radio Network and also right here on the Internet. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions, comments, or thoughts about the program tonight, or you want to contact us for any reason, please feel free to do so. Just check in on our discussion board, send us an email, you can call us. We want to hear from you. Your comments are important, and we are having some very a lot of activity on in the chat room tonight. It's a subject of great interest. We have an excellent panel with us, both in the studio and also calling in, men who are engaged in a labor of love of restoring warbirds of World War II. And it's interesting that not everyone who does that is necessarily a veteran, but it's someone who has a great respect for veterans and for these fantastic machines that were so influential in the victory that we had in the Second World War. The Veterans Radio Hour is brought to you by Dallas Corporation. For all your printing needs, check out Dallas's website at dallascorp.com, DALLASCORP. Check it out for the many graphic arts products and services they offer. Also, GIM Productions sponsors the Veterans Radio Hour. Websites can do that. Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer is a sponsor. As they say, PBR me ASAP. You can call us here while the show is in progress at 866-928-2329. That's 866-928-2329. You can reach the business office at 800-521-0020. Veterans Radio Hour is heard over the internet in some 55 countries around the world and also on the Information Radio Network. Just to mention a few people responsible for bringing the show to you each week. Carl King is the engineer and production director, Lambert Matias, studio manager. Mark Eli is our webmaster and chat master. Kenny DeCamp, senior producer, and Kenny is sitting in for General Dave, who is on TDY tonight. We hope he'll be back with us as soon as it's possible for him to do so. Joe Seguski is the phone moderator. I'm Fred Cutchins, your internet announcer, and Lance Hack was the creator of the Veterans Radio Hour, and he was inspired in this by his dad, Ralph Hack, who served in the China-Burma-India Theater during World War II. Stay with us here for the last half hour this evening of the Veterans Radio Hour. You know, I want to mention that our previous programs, dating back to September 8th last year when we first went on the air, are all archived right there on the website. And you can listen to any of those shows and perhaps re-listen to them if you've already heard them. It's a worthwhile investment of time of really fascinating shows, just like this evening's show, dedicated to World War II warbirds. Stay with us, warbird restoration. Stay with us. We'll be back on the air shortly.
The best in military talk radio now continues with the Veterans Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Veterans Radio Hour. We're glad you're with us. We're talking about warbird restoration, aviation, archaeology. We've got people all over the country with us today. Joe Pepito, he's in from Newbury Park, California. Bob Collings, Boston. Bob Cardin down in Kentucky, and Kermit Weeks in Florida. They all restore birds. And then we've got some guys sitting at the table here with us. Bob Coon and James Chybicki. They're with the Midwest Aeronautics, and Al Heinze is a weary warrior here. And then my co-host tonight is Mark Demmin, who is the executive director of a warbird unit here in Aurora, Illinois, I believe it is. Naperville, Illinois, right next door. Okay, we're going to bring this back down to some reality. We've been talking about some people who have 38 or 50 or 200 planes all over the world, and that's very unique. We've got a couple guys here from the Midwest Aeronautique out of Bolingbrook. Tell us again about what you guys are doing and what you started out, how it came out of your heart to begin making this happen.
Well, just to give you a little background, the three of us met at an aviation museum doing restoration on static displays. Through the course of that friendship, we decided that we needed to do something on our own. Two of us are pilots, and we decided to check out what the market had, and spent some time in San Antonio looking at a DGA, and some more time in southern Indiana, going almost border to border, looking at an Avion that was in about 6 different spots, and in Wisconsin that had another Avion with weeds growing up through the wing roots, and finally found the one that we purchased in a barn, the typical barn story. Some gentleman near Springfield owned it and found it in Trade-A-Plane, and lo and behold, it's a bona fide warbird. It's a Fairchild 24. It was made in 1943, put on a boat immediately, shipped to England for the Lend-Lease program, and from there it spent the next 4 years in the RAF, flying in the 73rd Squadron, and spent some time with a dentist. I think for the next 10 years, was shipped back to the States, disassembled, and has never flown since. Through various owners, found its way into the barn that we purchased it out of, and through the various owners, also took parts off of it. So we're trying to scavenge as much as we can. And I think this is where we all share the same thing, but it brings it down to the simple way of doing things. We have to pull prints from the Smithsonian Institute. Our airplane is tube and fabric, wood tube and fabric, and if we can't find the parts, we look for the prints. If we can't find the prints, then we just start calling around and getting on the internet. So it puts it more in perspective for the common Joe in it, and I'm sure that Kermit and Bob and some of the other fellows have gone through the same thing, but on a much larger scale.
Mm-hmm. Joe, I got a question that came in off our internet. It says to the California guy from, this is from Big Steve up in Oregon, or Washington. Washington. He wants to know, what's the status of the B-25 Devil Dog? You there?
They made an emergency landing down in, I think it was somewhere in Texas. I don't remember exactly offhand. I think it's back ready to fly again, or it is flying. They had to do some sheet metal work and replace one of the landing gear, and they had to get the prop repaired. But other than that, I think it's back in the air again.
Uh-huh. Bob Collings, you back with us in Boston there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. I know it's getting a little late for you, but another question came in. This one is from Ted, Sergeant Ted in Germany. What's the future availability of the 100LL fuel? And I don't know what that means myself. I guess it's...
Well, that's the 100 low lead. That's the aviation fuel that most round engines use. And although there's been a fair amount of concern on it, there does seem to be agreement that it is going to continue to be available. And in fact, a lot of these World War II airplanes, you can operate them on 87 octane, but you just can't use the power settings or the power boost. I would like to suggest one thing, and that is that we haven't talked about what I think is the most important ingredient yet, and that's the veterans themselves.
Good.
And their emotions. And, of course, we've talked earlier in the show about how that this is not a financially rewarding area, but it certainly is an emotionally rewarding area too. Particularly when you tour the airplanes and these veterans come out and with their sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters and so forth. And, of course, those that are not so fortunate to still have their dads with them, we find a lot of times they'll come out and they'll be searching for, a piece of their history. What was Dad doing as a tail gunner or a pilot or whatever. And I'd like to just share one story just to show you how powerful this can be, if you don't mind.
Please.
We were out in Oregon, and a fellow called us, and his dad was a B-17 pilot. And he took his dad out to see the B-17. He also took his son. So you had the grandfather, the B-17 pilot, the son, and the grandson. Grandson was about 8, and about 8 years previous to visiting the airplane, the grandfather, the pilot, had a stroke, and he'd lost the use of his voice. His son described that he was very mentally alert, had all his facilities, just that the stroke let him be debilitated, and he couldn't speak. Kind of sound like he was talking Russian. Well, they were inside the B-17. You can tour through the inside of these airplanes, and they were standing in the cockpit area, and the grandfather started talking very clearly about this mission that he was shot down on and how the plane was under attack and caught fire, and he helped his crewmen bail out. Of course, the son is astounded to hear his father speak again, and the grandson has never heard his grandfather talk. And so the son relayed the story, and he said tears were running down his eyes, and he said, but as soon as his father got outside that airplane and his feet hit the tarmac, it was back to garble. But while he was in that airplane, those emotions and that intensity of that memory were so powerful, he was able to overcome that handicap. And about a year later, we were out there again, and this was in the days when we could actually give people stick time. The FAA, in their wisdom, have decided that's not good. We had this gentleman fly with us, and he was sitting in the right seat, and he was talking on the intercom very clearly with the pilot, and relaying everything, and he remembered very, very well all of the power settings and where the gauges should be and so forth. So it's tremendously powerful, the opportunity for these veterans to be around these airplanes, and it gives a great opportunity to hear stories that you just won't hear before, because when they get around the planes, it kind of brings them to mind, and it kind of lets them come rushing out. And we all know this World War II generation were pretty quiet types. They didn't brag a lot, and this is a great opportunity to really hear what the stories are.
A great therapy. You said something about the FAA now not allowing the stick. Were you being cynical, or would you wish it would happen, or are you glad that we are in that kind of level of
well, this happened
safety?
Several years ago. This was very pre, 9/11
sort
of thing. No, it was just, there are several nonprofit organizations that allow people to take flights in these airplanes as part of their experience. They call them flight experiences. And it used to be with a qualified pilot in a two-pilot airplane, we could let somebody sit at the controls, at the other set of controls. And now our exemption letter doesn't allow us to do that. And it's too bad, because I think a lot of people don't fully appreciate how important this history is, both to the United States and also to the veterans who lived it.
Mm-hmm. That's true, Cameron. We've had the same experience. We got that C-46 China doll, and we had a guy that flew the hump come up. His son brought him out in a limousine, and we were going to take him up for a ride, and this guy was in his 80s, and we says, why don't you just sit over there in that left seat and try it? And he sat there, and you'd think he was built in that airplane. But like you say, you should have seen the tears come to his eyes when he sat in that left seat and flew that airplane. It's really something.
Yeah. I would imagine the therapy that it creates, we know some Vietnam vets, it's the same thing that some of their artwork is doing, but I guess to be a World War II vet and be able to go back onto one of those big ships like you used to and get the whole feeling of it, it's got to be something special. Whether it's the Navy, the Air Force, or even with these guys that are doing the artwork now to help them release, it's something that we've got to think about. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to break away for a quick moment before we go to a break and then come back in. The American Ex-Prisoners of War has been sending out some notices because apparently past 20 years they've made benefits a little easier for ex-POWs, and but for some reason there's the majority of them have not been involved, and the American Ex-Prisoner of Wars now would like you to, in any way you can, to start getting a hold of the VA Regional Office Director. Let him know that you're an ex-POW and that you want to be a part of it. Next week's show, we're going to be talking about some military stories that are quite poignant. And one of our POW friends has been in the audience with us tonight, Tom Jandanian, captured at the Battle of the Bulge by the Nazis back then. And just for him to come and be able to relive some of his stories have been, I think, not only therapeutic for him, but for a lot of us as well. We're going to be taking a break in a little while. We're going to be joined once again by Bob Coon and Jim Chybicki, both with the Midwest Aeronautics, Al Heinze, the Weary Warriors that are out here in Aurora, Illinois, Bob Cardin, the Lost Squadron, the P-38 Glacier Girl, Bob Collings, the Collings Foundation with various warbirds, and Kermit Weeks, Fantasy of Flight. Got a very large, wonderful collection down in Florida. Probably does a lot to help out with the therapeutic senses. And Joe Pepito with the Commemorative Air Force. We've got more questions coming in on our VeteransRadioHour.com. Looking forward to being back with you in just a few minutes on the Veterans Radio Hour.
Don't eject just yet. The Veterans Radio Show will reassemble after a short reconnoiter on the Veterans Radio Network.
You're listening to the Veterans Radio Hour. We're here every Sunday evening between 8 and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. I think we have really a fascinating show going on tonight, and we'll be going into the final segment of it shortly. We were just touching on the extraordinary emotional power of a restored vintage aircraft. And as I listened to the discussion, it occurred to me that really what these people are doing, these dedicated, wonderful people who are restoring aircraft, is that they are creating a legacy for future generations, because many of these aircraft, it seems, have gotten into such a state of disrepair that unless something has been done to bring them up to a better state, they could eventually be lost forever. But I think long after everyone here at the round table has disappeared from the scene, I think that these aircraft that these men are restoring are going to be there for future generations to enjoy and learn from and be emotionally moved by. So we here at the Veterans Hour certainly offer our appreciation and a salute to these guys who are dedicating themselves to restoring vintage aircraft. Next week's program is going to be on the subject of military stories. We're going to have some veterans with fascinating and emotionally powerful stories to tell us. So be sure to listen next week at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time to the Veterans Radio Hour. All of our previous programs, going back to September 8th when we debuted, are available on the website, on the archive, and you can look them up and listen to them and learn a lot. I mean, this is a program where anyone, whether you are or are not a veteran, is going to learn what our veterans have done for us, what they're doing for us now, and learn how much we owe them and how much we appreciate what they've done. So stay with us here, and we will be back on the air shortly.
The Veterans Radio Show is clear for a landing. Let's resume our broadcast from the Veterans Center studio.
I want to thank all of our guests for being with us tonight, talking about the Warbird restoration, aviation, archaeology. It's been very great and unique for us all to be here. I'm going to go around and let everyone give me about 30 seconds, if you would, of what you think is going on either today with your Warbirds or just what's going on today with our world. Kermit Weeks, could I start off with you?
Yeah, I would just like to say that there's a lot more Warbirds flying these days than there has ever been, and I think guys like Bob Collings and all the commemorative Air Force guys, I think it's a great tribute that they've done that, and I also want to thank the veterans for giving me a great free country to be able to do and enjoy what I enjoy doing, which is to fly these airplanes, to collect them, rebuild them, and share them with other people.
Hear, hear. And Bob Cardin out there in Kentucky?
Yes, sir. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who has made the sacrifices that we honor by the restoration of our aircraft and the sacrifices that they've given to preserve the freedoms that we have today, and let's hope that continues.
Yes, let's hope. Al Heinze, the Weary Warriors.
Just I wanted a brain lock.
You did? And just Al, just
enjoying the show.
Tell us what you feel about today, what's going on, our veterans and your Warbird experience.
Well, I believe that we should support our veterans who are serving overseas, and whether we disagree with them or not, it's, they're doing their job, like we did our job, and veterans before us did theirs. So it's only support 100%, and that's it.
Yeah, it's more of disagreeing with policies as opposed with our, we're supporting those people that are over there, quite a few of them who are, guards and reservists all of a sudden picked up right out, and some of them have been over a year already. And how about you, Robert Coon, for a moment?
Well, I was listening to Al talk when we were on break, and he spoke about legacy, and that's one of the things that I think we're trying to create. We're leaving a legacy. We're restoring a legacy. For those of you in the area, we're at Clow International Airport in Hangar 4, and we'll have her flying hopefully in 2005.
And James Chybicki.
Yeah, as Bob said, we're leaving a legacy out here for all the future generations to see. I think one of the biggest things to not forget is to keep these airplanes visible and flying so that we remember our history so we don't make the mistake in the future.
Mm-hmm. And Bob Collings, you've been a great guest with us tonight. What are your feelings today?
Well, I think World War II, because 55 million people died worldwide, is arguably the most important period in the history of mankind. It was a period in which really the United States and Britain together upheld tyranny from both the European theater and the Japanese theater. And thank heavens it turned out favorably. We believe that preserving some of these artifacts and relics of that period are very important, not only to pay honor to our veterans, but also to educate our young in terms of what this history is all about. The good news is in the private sector, the people you have around the table and on the phone are doing a lot to preserve these aircraft. The bad news, and sometimes shocking to people, is our national institutions like the National Air and Space Museum and the Air Force Museum are doing a terrible job. NASM has 450 historic aircraft, and they're restoring one a year. And that means they're being lost at a pretty rapid rate. While some of us go around the world, like the P-61 coming off the side of a mountain in Indonesia to try to find an artifact necessary to restore, NASM has a P-61 that sits in its hangar under a leaky roof, and it's not being preserved or whatsoever. So we need to do a far better job in our national institutions, and I think we need to support our president and be courageous like we almost weren't in World War II. We stayed out of that for a long time. We were an isolationist and hopeful that we could appease Hitler, and not until somebody bombed us did we finally turn around and do something. So I think we ought to follow our president and recognize that tyranny does not belong anywhere in this world.
And how about you, Joe?
Well, one of the objectives of the Commemorative Air Force is to perpetuate the memories in the hearts of all Americans of the spirit in which these great airplanes were flown during that big war. And I think today the people are still maintaining that particular policy and keeping that spirit alive.
Mm-hmm. For you, Joe, real quick, another email came in. What aircraft maker turned out the most aircrafts? Any idea?
Well, being a P-47 crew chief during World War II, a Republic built the biggest number of fighter aircraft. Over 13,000 P-47s were built. I'm not too familiar with the bomber numbers. But I think the B-24 was the biggest number of bombers built.
B-24 was about 18,500.
Yeah,
it was the most of any, but it was also produced by in 5 different locations by 3 different companies. So
yeah, somebody said the reason they built so many is because Ford built most of them.
Uh-huh. And I got another one here that said Paul Mance was a Marine Corps pilot in the 30s. Anybody know about him?
Paul Mance?
Yeah, something that he got kicked out for being a daredevil?
I doubt that he was a Marine Corps pilot.
Oh, that's
I'm reading a book now about Hollywood pilots, about Paul Mance. And actually, he was an Air Force cadet where he got his training. And I don't think he went beyond that.
Okay. Well, Again, I thank you all for being here. It's been a very unique show. We've been able to learn a lot from all of you. I wish you all the best. Support our troops. Say a few prayers. We're going to bring out our guests that we always end the show with a song, both in the first hour now and the second. I'd like you to meet our friend Tom, and he's got a song that he wants to dedicate to our troops.
This is an old song, goes back to the Vietnam War. It was actually written by a Green Beret soldier. Since tonight's theme was aviation, I just thought it'd be a good thing to do something for folks that, if they don't fly airplanes, they certainly appreciate those who do, and they jump out of them. Fighting soldiers from the sky, fearless men that jump and die, men who mean just what they say, men who wear that green beret, silver wings upon their chest. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test today, but only 3 with the green beret, trained to live off nature's land, trained in combat hand to hand, men who fight by night and day, courage peak from the green beret, silver wings upon their chest. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test today, but only 3 with the green beret. Back at home, a young wife waits. Her green beret has met his fate. He has died for those oppressed, leaving her a last request. Put silver wings on my son's chest. Make him one of America's best. He'll be a man, he'll test today. Have him
This
win.
has been the Veterans Radio Hour. Be sure to tune in again next week for our program at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on the internet and on the information.